What's going on, boyos? I got a quick video that I wanted to make for you guys today. So I was thinking back about what kind of videos that I desperately wanted to watch when I was first kind of getting into this. When I was getting into this, fitness YouTube was a very new thing, but there were still some guys that I felt were putting out good information. They were saying, okay, well, here are these general rules that if we abide by, we're going to have a good program. And all of it was good, sound information, but I remember always thinking, damn, I wish somebody would just tell me, do this fucking exercise. This one in particular, I think it's good. I think you should do it, right? And while that it doesn't lend itself to nuance, right? It lends itself to clicks, but it doesn't lend itself to nuance. It sells to say, this exercise is magic. This exercise has unique benefits. If you don't train high intensity, low volume, you're gonna make shit gains, right? Giving out one size fits all answers sells, but it's not probably the best way to educate people what's actually going on. It's better to say, okay, well, in this context, this is really helpful. This is something that you could rotate in, but in this other context, it might not be best. But that's not really like fun. And also, even for people that do understand all that, I guess it's not as fun, right? So I decided I would try to do something a little bit more fun, have a little video series of just exercises I think you guys should have in your routine, or at least give a good trial run to. So today, going to be something that's a staple of just about every program I write, and I think it should be in yours. And I'm basically going to give you the brief rundown on why. What it is going to be unilateral leg volume. My go-to exercises are usually walking lunges or Bulgarian split squats with the rear foot elevated, although I think you could put single leg press in there as well. It's not my favorite of the three, and I'm going to touch on that later because I know a lot of people would actually put that as their favorite of the three for the exact kind of same reasons it's not my favorite. But here's basically a brief rundown of why I think these should be in your program, right? One, the fact that it's unilateral kind of works to reduce asymmetry, and while all humans are asymmetrical, and that doesn't mean that our injury risk is massively elevated, from a performance perspective, it is something that we should look to minimize. And just by having unilateral volume present in our program, we kind of have this background stimulus always kind of pushing us towards a rough level of symmetry to maintain. So I think that's something that's a cool benefit, right? The second one, and this is why I actually prefer the walking lunge and the Bulgarian split squat over something like the single leg press, is that not only do they challenge our stability, right? So we improve our ability to stabilize at the hip joint, which is a powerful benefit in itself, but they also can challenge our balance, right? Not so much the single leg press, but the other two challenge our balance, right? And a lot of people would say, well, no, this is going to limit my proximity to failure. I'm limited more by my balance than I am anything else. And here would be my pitch where that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think it's, especially if we're talking about a high bar squat, it's kind of a consensus opinion that the back squat is more of a feat that requires general athleticism than maybe the bench press is, or maybe the deadlift is. So someone who is athletic tends to excel a little bit quicker at the squat because it's a little bit more complex. You're moving your body through space. And so having good balance and good proprioception is something that helps make you a good squatter. So saying that this accessory challenges that skill is almost a benefit in that regard. So I do like that they kind of challenge your balance a little bit, and then once your balance is good enough to where you can take your muscles to more mechanical failure without balance being the limiting factor, awesome, then they are even better of an exercise. So to me, it's kind of a built-in benefit. I just find that most of the best squatters I know, especially if we're talking high bar, are more athletic than they are not. And so challenging our athleticism a little bit with these movements is something that I find totally good. But either way, whether we do the single leg press or we do these other two that I like, we're going to be challenging our ability to stabilize our hip. This is really good, tons of benefits to our squat. The next thing we're going to look at is by making it single leg rather than bilateral, we're going to be challenging our adductor and glute. So this kind of ties into stabilizing the hip, but what musculature is that going to place additional emphasis on? It's going to place a lot more emphasis on our glutes and our adductors, right? Which are, I would say, commonly musculature that could be built up a little bit more regardless of where someone's at in their training career. We could all usually use better, stronger hips. The other thing I like that when we do these, we're kind of in this this purely sagittal plane, whereas when we do a bilateral exercise, we're driving the knees out, and we're kind of using that frontal plane as well. One thing that I think is nice is if you're someone who does your squats from a wider stance, you might not feel that squatting builds much power in your conventional deadlift position, whereas split squatting, because we're kind of in that frontal plane, operating kind of in a singular line, you might find that actually gives you a better feel of power off the floor than what your squatting was driving for your deadlift. So little secondary benefit there. I remember the best my power off the floor ever was on my deadlift was when I was hammering single leg press pretty hard, I think, as an accessory on that session. And then the final reason I think this should be in here, and this is a concept that I probably am not bringing to you for the first time. If you watch my videos, if you watch Paris's videos, it's something we've talked about many times, and that is the benefit of squat pattern volume that's not limited by your lower back, right? If we do as much front squatting and back squatting as we can, let's say that's 12 sets per week. Usually the reason we can't do any more is because of the fatigue to our back. It's not necessarily that our legs and glutes and adductors couldn't handle a bit more squat pattern volume, right? So we've talked about, okay, we'll fill up as much actual squatting as you can. We've run into these limitations of like axial fatigue, but then let's fill in more squat pattern volume with something like a hack squat, a belt squat, something like a deep leg press, are all ways to get more of that same squat pattern movement, but removing this one limiting factor. So that way we can get this surplus of leg strength. And generally speaking, I think people squat better when they kind of have that perceived surplus of strength in the legs. And unfortunately for everybody who hates them, the split squat and the walking lunge and the single leg press are squat pattern, and they're not limited by the lower back. So everybody will be like, oh, my leg press doesn't let me do HEG leg presses. Too bad for you, you're going to be doing some split squats. People say, oh, in a home gym setting, how do you fill in that extra volume? Too bad for you, you're going to be doing lunges or split squats if you're programmed by me. I would usually pick those as my go-to home gym fill in an extra leg volume kind of motion. I usually would favor these over something like a Hatfield squat because there's still some pretty significant axial loading going on there. But yeah, the biggest benefit to this exercise is not unique to this exercise, and it lets us it lets us do a bunch of extra leg volume independent of that kind of spinal erector fatigue that we've built up from our main squats. So that's why I think you should do them. If you're a beginner, I would try to rotate between them, find what you like. If you find ones get stale, rotate to the next one. At some point, you might just find, I feel like I get better work out of one or the other. And I've got a lot of clients who are just like, yeah, no, I don't have room in my gym, so I just do split squats. I work hard in split squats every week, and I derive the benefits. I am more of a walking lunge enthusiast myself. I know lots of people that just find that things get old, so they like having that ability to rotate between them. But eventually you can kind of decide, okay, well, this is the one I like more, so this is what I'm going to do. That's okay. As long as you're doing one of them, you've passed this test. Thank you for watching.